You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
In this podcast, we cover everything from churches and church planting efforts, mission and missions organization evangelism, and unreached people groups, emerging movements and initiatives, justice, current events related to faith, and the persecuted church, to author interviews, and more. Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome back to our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed, and today I'm joined by former investment banker and Miss India International turned geopolitical expert and media entrepreneur, Preity Upala. Our conversation today is going to be slightly different from most episodes, as we are going to focus on the sport cricket. It's the sport that I grew up with, and we're going to also look at why people in the U.S. should care about it. While cricket is not well known in the US at all, it's extremely popular and even a form of a soft power globally. It plays a major role in many urban areas around the world. Before we jump in a little bit about our guest today, in addition to the outstanding credentials that I just mentioned, she is a woman of many trades. She has published over 200 articles featuring her political expertise and is involved with many think tanks and institutions. She's originally from Dubai, was raised in Australia, and currently living in Los Angeles. She also has a forthcoming book, The Global Game. So please look out for that. Once it comes, I will love you to grab a copy of that. And this book focuses on cricket. So naturally, we have our guest on this show so that we can talk about cricket from a global perspective. So thank you so much for joining us today, Preity. How are you?
Well, namaste. Thank you so much, Dr. Javed, for having me on your wonderful Our Urban Voices podcast. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you today and your listeners and to have this amazing conversation. I am having a beautiful day. I'm about to embark on a European adventure for a film festival in a few days. So very, very excited indeed.
That's so awesome. And I hope people follow you wherever you go. And you are definitely making a difference in many ways in the world. So Preity, because we mainly have a US audience, I'm going to start off by giving our listeners a quick description of the game. The closest game that Americans could compare cricket to is baseball. You have a pitcher, a batter, and the outfield. But instead of running around bases, the batter and the pitcher run between two short sets of vertical posts called wickets. The goal of pitching is to knock off two small wooden pieces resting on the wickets. If you want to learn more about cricket, you can find more info in the episode description below. All right, now tell us, Preity, what is so special about cricket?
Absolutely. And your intro was brilliant because you said, why should people in the US care about this sport? Well, it's funny because it's actually the second biggest, most viewed, most lucrative, most popular sport in the world, second only to soccer. And I will predict within 2050, it could even be number one because of the size of the market. It's many of the other Anglosphere countries really love this sport, and it's a big deal over there. But it's only the US where it's still an enigma. And it will change slowly. It will change. They may not get into it, obviously, the way the people in subcontinent or in England and Australia do. But I think it's important that a game this big needs to be more known, I think, at least in the US. Now,
and I think, I'm sorry for interrupting. I really enjoy that you are the one who's talking about cricket. I mean, one, a woman perspective, two, a woman who is writing a book on with a political perspective on this. And I thought that's like perfect for our podcast because our Urban Voices is not only urban voices in the US, but it's also a diverse voices from different ethnicities, from different genders, but also from different countries. And when I was looking at your credentials, I was amazed how you have evolved. You can see your passion, and it's just so different that a woman has. So why women care about cricket? And let me just. I'm trying to be as nice as I can because it is cricket and it's dominated by men. So why a woman is talking about cricket? I know that it was not part of our conversation, but it just intrigued me.
No, great question, and it is sort of. I think your point about diverse voices being heard, and especially on a topic like this, which is it really the subcontinent dominates this, right? So anytime you have you want to have a conversation on something like cricket, it's one thing to have an Aussie bloke talk about it, and it's very different having an Indian woman coming from that background talking about it. You never see it. And I think it's important in so many ways. And ultimately, cricket is really a metaphor for everything. It brings in culture, race, class, religion, and it's what happens off the field is a metaphor for what happens on the field. And I think that's the perspective with which I view it. And when I write and speak about it, I'm coming from a very different perspective, not just from a technical point of view or just looking at the game as a sport, which is probably what 99% of the cricket fans would view it like that. Because I come from political and even a philosophical background, my view on this sport is very unique. And I think nobody really talks about it, even in the world. I think it's just a personal choice. I grew up playing with my brother and his friends, and I grew up loving the game. And it was just a personal. I actually love sports in general. I also love soccer and tennis, hockey, basketball, gymnastics, many other sports. I've always been a sports lover, and I think that's just a personal preference.
So
other women may,
sure. Go on. Sorry.
No, I was saying other women may or may not enjoy it. That's, I think, their prerogative. I think one should never be forced to like it or watch it. And I think the women who do genuinely appreciate it, I think they really like it. They really like the game, and that's a wonderful thing.
So, how do you define soft power in reference to cricket?
Wonderful. So, firstly, we should talk about soft power in what it is in general, and then we can look at the cricket perspective. Now, soft power was a coin termed by Dr. Joseph Nye of the Harvard University, and essentially it's power which is not hard power. So it's power that is neither military nor nuclear, and yet it has the ability to co-opt the rest of the world into its perspective and its way of thinking. That's the power that a nation has to, I would say, co-opt as opposed to coerce. And I think soft power without hard power, unfortunately, it leaves the state kind of weak. And hard power without soft power isn't very effective. So ultimately you need both. But I think the most powerful countries in the world are hard powers with an incredible sort of level of soft power. I mean, for example, Thailand is a country which I would say big on soft power, huge on tourism and, just everything, their culture, their food, even the spiritual aspect. But then they're not a nuclear power. They don't have a huge military to speak of. Then you look at a country like North Korea, which is a nuclear power,
Mm.
and I'm not so sure what North Korea's soft power would be actually. So, that's the dichotomy. I think a country like America has both. A country like India also has both, but I think ironically, its hard power is actually stronger because it has a very strong military. And its soft power, although the ingredients are there, it hasn't. I think it could do a better job at projecting it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah. And
So,
so specifically coming to cricket, I think as our conversation goes on, we will see how suddenly the sport has become like a symbol for like this dominance and this a rising India, right? Like a new India, a new Bharat is somehow synonymous with its incredible dominance in this game. Like the nature of that dominance, not so much the quality, but I would say the just in numbers,
right.
in scale and size, it's ridiculous, it's colossal. So when you can look at sort of India's rise as an economic and a geopolitical power, and then you can look at India's this incredible rise in this game of cricket, which they're parallel stories, I think, and they are tied, I think, as we will see, they are tied in many subtle ways.
Yeah. Actually, I was watching this, I think it's a documentary movie where it's a couple Dave, his when he won the World Cup and the way he approached and the statements he's using in the it's a Netflix, I think it's a Netflix movie. And I was amazed because the idea there is that everybody is clearly saying that, oh yeah, you guys are free, but you have not gotten our respect yet. And you can play, but you are not there yet. So it was like very much like you still in terms of this game, you are beneath us. And then of course he wins, right?
Yes.
So and that's the whole idea of that movie, which was very moving. And you can see politics and power being played. Even the guy who was the main guy who was leading the team, right, in the World Cup, he doesn't have money. He goes there. They do not give him access to this main hall or main area where the game will take place, the final one, because they know that they can't get there. And he said, one day I will come back. And he does. Yes. So it was powerful to just see the whole, as you said, power being played, right? And is a soft, I think it was a soft power there too, because at the end, it was a victory, both mental, and emotional. And anyways, so can you give me an example, unless I stole your example, can you give me an example about how cricket has soft power?
Well, I think so. Where we will come to the IPL eventually. IPL is the Indian Premier League. It's very similar to the English Premier League. So it's a tournament. It's a domestic Indian tournament. But what they have done brilliantly is they've got international players that play for these sort of domestic Indian teams. And it is, I would say, second only to the English Premier League. It's probably the most lucrative sport in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar game, and the franchises are run by billionaires, and the ridiculous amount of, the TV rights for this tournament is enormous. Several years ago it was, I think in the millions, and now it's I don't know how much it's going to be sort of 5 years from now. It only keeps growing, and you look at the ratings and the eyeballs, and it's incredible. And all of that, I think today, back in the day, I think even for an Indian cricketer to go to England and play at Lord's was a big deal. And to study in the UK was a big deal, right? Today, the young English county cricketer, his dream is to play in the IPL, and you'll be surprised how many young, if you really, you have to watch the interviews of some of these international players, because they're pretty candid and honest, and you listen to them and they're like, whoever is listening, I'm ready for the IPL, baby, sign me up. Because they know that the amount of money and power and fame, I think, that they will get is more than their entire sort of domestic career back in their country, whether it's Australia or England. A lot of cricketers, I think before the IPL came in, cricket was not a rich sport in this. It was an elite sport played by rich people, but there was no money in it as such. And now it's, again, it's become one of the most lucrative tournaments, and the whole game has lifted, because I think what the IPL generates financially and economically, it supports the whole game internationally, and it supports other boards as well indirectly, and that money really trickles down in so many ways. So I would say that's an example of soft power, where now you have these international, foreign, English speaking, Western countries, and their dream is to play in India for a little Indian town, because they know that their life is going to be made, and some of them actually perform far better for their little IPL team than they do for their own country. So that's the I think the dichotomy of the world that we find ourselves in, I think. And definitely this game, I think, represents what is going on in the world for sure.
So IPL, Indian Premier League, and you said that it is doing really well, that even international cricketers want to go and play in India, right? So would you say that governments investing more in local cricket facilities, team, etc., would bring a greater return on investment than other types of government services? And it's okay if you disagree with that too. I'm just wondering.
So yes. So I mean, this is a cheeky comment. Even I've made this in the past. I've said IPL has done more for Indian soft power than, the whole foreign service put together. In some ways, even Bollywood has done that, to be fair. I think Bollywood has done more for Indian soft power than our diplomats, quite frankly. So in the same way, I just make a cheeky comment. I will say that BCCI, which is the cricket board in India, has done more for just India, sort of it has gotten more people out of poverty than the government. I mean, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there. However, I will say they've done their fair share. I think government of India does. They have ministries that take care of different aspects: railroads, education, empowerment, poverty, hunger, all those things. The BCCI does its bit, and its job is growing the game in India, and also taking care of players and all of that. But by bringing in IPL, and just with this huge, how lucrative cricket has become, it does so much, because when it builds, stadiums, that's infrastructure. It's a lot of development that's happened. And this is a multi-million-dollar sort of sport now in India, and the money that is generated, it trickles down. It goes into small towns, has lifted thousands and thousands of people, players, their families, their extended sort of the communities out of poverty. It's given them an incredible sense of belief and power. And also they're run by these huge industrialists like the Ambanis, who own Reliance. And Mr. Mukesh Ambani is one of the richest men in India. He owns Mumbai Indians, one of these teams. I mean, the amount of investment that they've done in their local community and in their city for the youth, for development, for grooming young talent, and just inspiring kids, and fitness and sports is enormous, priceless, right? And every franchise has done that. And now it's become a pan-India thing. So you have the whole country that's benefiting. I think I do want to say that you often hear in the Western media and some of the other cricketing boards, and also sometimes their journalists and non-Indian or non-subcontinent cricketing fans, I would say, who they love to take a dig at the Indian board, right, at the BCCI. They love to just whatever, they want to make, it's easy target, very easy to sort of, and they never get any pushback because the BCCI never sort of responds to that. So it's easy to sort of criticize them, but I think they would not be able to do half the job had they been given that money and power, because it's an enormous job. And I think the BCCI has done a phenomenal job to grow the game, not just in India, but to make it international and to make it this spectacular sort of sport. And it's been pretty diplomatic, I would say, in many ways. And I think they should be commended for what they're doing. And I'd like to see these, these statements always come with a tinge of envy and a lack of humility to maybe accept that the power now belongs to somebody else. And you will never compare with those numbers, and you will never be back there. It'll never happen. So be humble and appreciate India, I think, for what it's doing for cricket globally.
And the thing that I thought while you were talking, the empowerment of youth and giving them belief, inspiring the next generation and even the current generation, especially when a country is growing and building and becoming. In the midst of that, it's important to have some sort of anchor, right? So in the midst of so many awful habits and powers that are against young people, I think this is a wonderful thing to direct people to sports. Sports in general, it teaches you discipline, it teaches you hard work, it helps you to focus on the right thing, and that helps you to stay away from some of those bad habits. So economical aspect and political and all the other things are one thing, but I think on a social level, what it does to a person psychologically, what it does to a person is amazing. So now on a geopolitical scale, do you think cricket could benefit relations between countries? For example, here we are, a Pakistani and an Indian talking amicably. Historically, India and Pakistan have been bitter enemies. Do you think cricket could benefit relations between our former nations, between Pakistan and India? Something can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I want to point out that cricket really is the ultimate unifier. It brings the world together. Its impact is truly beyond the boundary, so to speak. And it bridges countries and nations. And even when you look at India vis-a-vis England and Australia or New Zealand, it's the dynamic has changed. I don't think you see an intimidated or an ashamed India today. You know, with 50 years ago, that was the case. And today, because of India's economic and sort of geopolitical rise and prowess, I would say, its stand in the world, because I think the GDP of India recently overtook the GDP of the UK in PPP terms. So this is, I mean, the irony of the world and time, I think, on how things truly sort of come back full circle, which is what's happening. I think what we're seeing in the world today is actually a shift completely in the balance of power in the world. And the Asian century is the new story. And that subcontinent is the heart of the Asian story. All the subcontinent countries, including Pakistan, by the way, they are, this is where really the future is. And 50 years from now, the greatest rise, the greatest sort of story of the rising superpower will be the Indian story. Now, going back to specifically with the India-Pakistan dynamic, people forget, 75 years ago, it was one country. So we must never forget that we are the same people in many ways. And I think sometimes, whether it's education system or some political people would love to sort of distort that reality. And they are trying to make people think that your ethnicity is something very different and your identity is, you're not Indian, that is your main identity. And that's very dangerous, I think, because, you should never forget ultimately, look, all humans we are the citizens of the planet in many ways. And specifically with India and Pakistan, yes. So my, little background, I grew up in Dubai. So I grew up playing and watching cricket with my Pakistani neighbors, and also with my, all of my neighbors were Muslims from either India or Pakistan. So I was truly the minority there, by fact that I was Indian, but also the fact that I was not a Muslim in a Muslim country. So, but that was my upbringing, I think, and I enjoyed it so much. It added so much richness. And so I know the explosive nature of the India-Pakistan games. I think those are the most viewed, the most anticipated games, I think, in the world. I mean, an India-Pakistan World Cup final I think that would be the most watched sporting event in history. I mean, even the World Cup, the Cricket World Cup in 2019, the semi-final with India and New Zealand, I believe, had more eyeballs than the actual final, right? So this is the power. And even the final, most of that was watched by Indians anyway. So the irony of it all, I do think that it's good for the game, for the countries to play. It'll be great for both teams. And however, I would say, as a fan, I want to see that. It's so exciting. I can't wait. But I think when you look at ground realities, I think the ball is really in Pakistan's court. I think if they want to have cricket with India, we are so open for that. We have always been open. They can have all the cricket, but I think as a state, they need to be more responsible. And you can't have, I think, like, terrorism and sport don't go together. So I think the BCCI made a stand, a kind of a firm stand several years ago, actually, that, you can't have this sort of soldiers dying at the border and then have cricket, because that's disrespectful to the parents of the martyred soldiers. I mean, they're being a bit dramatic there, but that's the sentiment. And so I think the takeaway from this is actually a huge opportunity for Pakistan, because this is an incentive. Open the door, go for it. I think India is very open. We've coexisted with people all throughout our many thousands of years existence. And we don't have, I mean, if we can have such nice relationships with England, somebody who colonized us and invaded us for 200 years, and look at the dynamic today, surely, people that are really ours, or we are the same. I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be playing cricket. But I think there is the caveat. I think you can't sort of have this, terrorism across the border and then expect to have the game, because a cricket tournament will benefit Pakistan a lot economically. And so it's like a sort of carrot, I think it's only an incentive.
Yeah. So you already alluded to this, but I'm just going to come back to this question. How does the dominance of India in cricket globally coincide with India's rise economically and geostrategically?
Yeah, great question. It's funny because it's that story has risen, I think, very much in parallel, because today I see an Indian team that on the field, I've never seen them more confident and more aggressive and assertive, which is great, I think. And when I know in my own living memory, I've never seen either Indians who live around the world or the Indian traveler who goes everywhere. I've never seen them, I think, hold their head up high more than they do today. I really see that. And, cricket plays its part in I think, again, the image, the soft power, like it's done a lot, I think, for brand India, so to speak. And it should continue, because I think in the Olympics, I hope that it is introduced in maybe the T10 or the T20 format. And then the whole world will really see what that T20 is about. And that'll add another dimension. I have heard that the 2024 T20 World Cup will be held in America. So now the American market is going to be introduced.
That's
It's big in the
awesome.
Caribbean. So the Caribbean and US are jointly going to host it. And I hope I can be a part of that whole show in some way. But I just think that it, my only concern is the small amount of Indians who actually who dislike cricket, who think that this is a colonial sport, we shouldn't be playing this, we are enslaved again through it. And I think that kind of mindset doesn't help anyone. And there are people still in India who want to do away with cricket altogether. And they think that, I mean, look, there is an underbelly in every sport, as there is in cricket. They want to just I think they want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I think is not very wise. I think you need to see cricket for the power that it gives you and for the soft power that it is for India, and try to work on just targeting the problem areas, which they are, and do something about that. Don't get rid of it. I think it's the one area where you actually dominate globally. And I know that Indians love to, they say that they want to be this great superpower and this Vishwa Guru, this spiritual guru to the world. They make all these statements, but ironically, they're not there yet. And I don't know when and if we will get there. They would like to see their music and their cuisine and their culture more appreciated globally, which I don't think is the case yet. But there's this one area where they actually dominate in a ridiculous fashion, and I think they're not acknowledging that. So there is, I think some of the problem lies in the Indian mindset to all of this as well.
Yeah. So this potential World Cup here in America, perhaps we need to start getting people ready here, right? So how would you suggest an American audience to get started in cricket if they are interested? And
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and where can they tune in easily to watch games?
Wonderful. They will, and it does take some time to sort of warm up to it and sort of get yourself ready. So people don't realize that America is the second largest cricket, market in the world, even though they don't. Yeah, well, the eyeballs, because the diaspora here watches, they tune in. And also, I think the diaspora here, the entire subcontinent diaspora, plus the English, Australian, New Zealand, South African, and the Caribbean diaspora who live in the US, they are financially very well off. And they have a lot of disposable income. They will they will watch and celebrate this game, and they'll pay for it, sort of handsomely, which is what's going on. So I think even though there's no national team yet, we have a major league, we have a minor league. I think we're working our way up to hopefully getting a national team sometime. But the places where you can tune in, if you live in America, you can go to Willow TV, and I think it's a part of Sling TV. So you go to those two places, they do air a lot of the games there, most of the games there. I think you can subscribe and you can tune in. Of course, there are live, feeds and broadcasts, and you can on radio as well. You can tune into many different English, Aussie, or even Indian stations that sort of broadcast these games. You can try checking out IPL website, of course, the ICC website, the BCCI website also has very good videos and things like that. But I would say if you are a big baseball fan in America, I think you will enjoy and appreciate cricket for what it is. So if you're a huge baseball fan, trust me, get into cricket. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's like a more explosive version of baseball, I would say. Certainly, and the energy is very, I think, much more dramatic and dynamic because of the crowds and the color and the music and everything.
And if listeners wants to get in touch with you, Preity, or find your upcoming book, what are the easiest ways?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for asking me that. So I'm everywhere. I'm pretty accessible. On Twitter, I am the Preity Effect. So
Okay.
please find me and follow me. On Instagram, I am also at the Preity Effect, and please join me, follow me there too. Facebook, it's Preity Upala. My website, preittyupala.com, and the preittyexperience.com will be they're being redesigned. They'll be live soon. I have my own channel called the Preity Experience on YouTube, and I have the audio podcast as well, which is also the Preity Experience, and it's on all the portals, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, all of it. And you can find a lot of my videos, my interviews on YouTube and on Vimeo. And also I write extensively on all of these topics. And if you just Google my name and report or article or journalism or media, you'll see a lot of collection of my work and all of that. So please do find me, reach out. I think I'm very
Definitely.
engaging. I love
Yeah.
to hear from people. So
That's
please go
great.
ahead.
And that will also be included in the episode description. And as we wrap it up, tell me quickly about your family, which is so important for me, and I think for the audience. This makes us, it humanizes us. So very briefly, give me just maybe like 20-second summary of that.
Wonderful. I give credit to everything that I am in the world today. Honestly, it's because of my parents and because of upbringing and the fact that they imbued this culture, traditions, faith, all of that from a very, very young age. And we've lived around the world, but I think our traditions never left us. And that has taught me I can go anywhere in the world and I can feel at home. I feel very much a part of the fabric of society over there. They taught me to be open to the places where we lived in and understand that we were a guest there. We were very much the minority. My whole life, I've always been an outsider and a minority. And that's taught me, I think, maybe the humility to look at things in a bigger way. So I give credit to them. And even specifically with cricket, my father is the one who introduced the sport to me. My brother used to play the game and he was pretty good. And I sort of, if it wasn't for him sort of encouraging me to join in and play and watch, I wouldn't have developed that passion for sport at all.
Yeah.
And so I give, I think, a lot of credit to my family, my parents. I'm very close to them, and they're still my biggest fans and biggest supporters today. So it warms my heart.
Yeah. All right. So tell me a joke. That's how we're going to end the program.
Well, I don't have a joke for you, but I do have a small anecdote, which I think will be the perfect sort of analogy for our conversation today and for this topic, which is deep and heavy and yet important. So I wrote a piece on cricket and soft power, very much what we're talking about. It was actually the titled the biggest sporting event in the world, and it was the India-Pakistan match for the 2019 World Cup, which I believe was one of the most viewed games ever in history. So I wrote a piece for that, and it was accepted. It was published at an Israeli Jewish outlet, a huge like Times of Israel, and somebody read that article and they wrote to me. I got an email and he said, I read your amazing article. I loved it. I don't know anything about cricket, but thank you for introducing me. And he happened to be, he was neither Jewish nor was he Israeli. He was English and he was a Christian. And at the end of the email, he said, by the way, I am visually completely impaired. I am blind, and I read your article on a special Braille tablet. So, I mean, I didn't have words for that. But then he told me, I was so intrigued by your article that I went to my church and I spoke to my vicar about it. And guess what? His vicar was Pakistani. and the vicar was crazy about his cricket. And they had a conversation about cricket. I mean, like, what are the odds of a person living in Los Angeles, instilling this conversation between a visually impaired English Christian guy who knows nothing about it, talking to a Pakistani vicar? I mean, that is the story of cricket, and I think that is also the story of diversity, multiculturalism, inclusion, openness, tolerance, religion, faith, beauty, everything that we aspire for. I think that is basically that in a nutshell.
Wow. Thank you so much for being on the show, Preity. Again, that was Preity Upala.
Yes.
And did I pronounce correct?
You did, Preity Upala. And thank you, Dr. Javed. It was such an honor to have this brilliant conversation. I speak about different things, but this particular topic, I don't speak enough of it. And I should be sort of voicing out the beauty of it more, because I think it's a very important one right now for what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. And thank you to all our listeners. If you appreciate this podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcast. Tune in next week for more honest discussions from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Please check back for new episodes every week.